Thank you, Dean Clarence Lang and Dr. Rosa Eberly, for inviting me to speak at the 2020 Constitution Day event for the College of the Liberal Arts. I too wish to thank students, staff, faculty, and administrators for recognizing the importance of this event to our understanding of the structure of our government, including its legislative, executive, and judicial branches. My charge today is to engage with you about the United States Constitution, its history, its implementation, and its durability to achieve its promise. I know that your focus this year is on the Eighth Amendment, and I am grateful to the other speakers, representatives from organizations working with those who are incarcerated and their families, for addressing directly the issues surrounding excessive bail, excessive fines, and the infliction of cruel and unusual punishment, all of which is constitutionally prohibited. In speaking with you today about the 19th Amendment, I seek to draw a general connection to the history of the fight for the ballot and the constitutional enlargement of the franchise beyond white men with power, privilege, and property. I've been working on a law review article this summer in anticipation of my teaching of an intensive 4-week course titled Women's Suffrage, the 19th Amendment, and the Duality of a Movement. The article and the course were originally conceived to mark the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. However, against the backdrop of the coronavirus global pandemic, which is disproportionately impacting Black and Brown people, especially those who are incarcerated, the heightened social movement demanding racial equality following another cascade of murders and assaults on Black and Brown bodies by police impunity. Of course, I speak of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, and countless more. And an impending presidential election in which voter tampering, voter fraud, and voter suppression are on full display. I speak of Russian interference in our elections, and the attack from within on the United States Postal Service. I knew that I had to address not just the 19th Amendment, but also the Reconstruction Amendments to really capture what is at stake in 2020 and beyond. Several evenings ago, after spending time working on my article, I went out to my stoop to clear my head to think about these very remarks. Since taking on my first deanship 5 years ago, I have delivered over 200 speeches, many of which centered the discussion on the Reconstruction Amendments as a great yet squandered opportunity to reboot our nation in service to the fundamental principles of liberty and justice for all. And yes, the 13th Amendment is brilliant in its tribute to the principle of liberty undergirding the Declaration of Independence. But its implementation was lackluster in that the will and capacity of our politicians, officers of the courts, and citizens were not united in reinforcing unconditional freedom for formerly enslaved Black people. The failures in implementation were magnified by the myriad compromises shackling the later ratifications of the 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments. Events and debates preceding the ratifications of the 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments bring to the fore two fundamental questions that invoke manifestations of inalienable rights within a democracy. One is citizenship rights, and the other is voting rights. On the citizenship rights question, many an argument was raised in opposition to recognizing as citizens enslaved Black people, and freeborn Black people. These arguments were rooted in, among other things, racist ideas about the perceived inadequacy of Black people to be considered equal to and worthy of the rights guaranteed to white citizens. On the voting rights question, many racist and sexist arguments were made in opposition to recognizing the political agency of, among others, indigenous peoples, enslaved and freeborn Black people, women generally and women of color specifically, children, non-whites, immigrants, and landless people, many of whom, regardless of status, were taxpayers. These arguments were generally rooted in racist and sexist ideas professed by white men that virtual representation and coverture provided all the protection that was needed. Such arguments must be compared to and contrasted with the rebuke by white aristocratic American men about the British Parliament's claims of virtual representation over them. As many have noted throughout the past 200 plus years, these incompatible positions are an affront to the promise of America's democracy. To be sure, the United States Constitution then and now has baked within it racist and sexist ideas, implemented through powerful beliefs in a legitimacy of human hierarchy based on differences of race and gender. Privileged white men have missed opportunities to reckon with racial and gender equality by, among other things, compromising the voting rights of all men and the protection of the civil rights of all people, especially Black men and Black people, respectively, which was envisioned by the 14th Amendment. As well, compromising the protection of voting rights of Black men envisioned by the 15th Amendment, and compromising the protection of voting rights of all women, including women of color, envisioned by the 19th Amendment. If we believe, and believe we must, in both our birthright of United States citizenship and our obligation to realize the power and the promise of the United States Constitution, we must exalt the foundational principle of the inalienability of natural rights. We must jettison versions of liberty that prioritize protection of property over protection of human beings. We must acknowledge proudly that voting is an act of political and social self-determination that supports our collective investment in a strong democracy. We must exalt the fact that the 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments to the United States Constitution signal expansion of the franchise, not contraction. As such, our concerted actions as members in service to our American democracy must acknowledge the non-rivalrous nature of voting rights and the obligation to continue to pursue the expansion of the franchise. To be clear, this means, among other things, pursuing changes in state and federal laws to extend the franchise to incarcerated people. As well, it means ensuring that voting districts are based on total population, as opposed to voting age citizens, so that we may continue the constitutional mandate of counting everyone. Thank you for indulging me and my thoughts about the United States Constitution during this important event. I look forward to learning from and engaging with you and other speakers on this Constitution Day.